Good morning, everyone. My name is Lauren Lele, and I am the Senior Director for Community Health at Newton-Wellesley Hospital. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to our program entitled Senior Steps for Better Health, a program that is a part of the hospital's focused attention on heart health. Today's educational session is a part of our ongoing senior webinar series. Before the program officially starts, I would like to mention a few logistics for the next hour that we would spend together. We will be leaving plenty of time for questions and answers, and would ask that you use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen to type your questions in. I will monitor the questions and be asking them of our presenters at the end of the speaking portion of the program. And now let me tell you a little bit about who you will hear from. Jane Barr is the Community Wellness Coordinator for Newton-Wellesley Hospital's Cardiovascular Health Center. She is a licensed dietitian with a Master of Public Health. Her background includes development, implementation, and evaluation in primary and secondary disease prevention. Bob Javier is a retired periodontist, having practiced for over 40 years at practices located in Wellesley and Newton Center. Bob now serves as the co-coordinator of the Mendon Hearts of Newton group. He was a previous patient of Newton-Wellesley Hospital Cardiac Rehab after an emergency quadruple bypass in 2020. He also spends his time as chairman of peer review and commissioner of trials for the Metropolitan District Dental Society. And just to mention that we will be sharing both Bob and Jane's slide decks after the webinar, as well as we will be providing additional resource materials that have been suggested by the both of them. And so now to begin the program, I will turn it over to Jane.
Thank you, Lauren. So I'm just going to take a second and share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that okay. I just want to say I'm really happy that you are able to join me today on this beautiful day that we're lucky enough to have this November. And today I'm going to talk to you about small steps for better heart health. This is a really great topic because I'm going to give you a lot of information, but you can take away from it, hopefully, small changes that you can make in your diet to increase your heart health. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to talk about today are the risk factors for heart disease. So there's two types. There's modifiable risk factors and there's non-modifiable risk factors. So what is the difference? So modifiable risk factors are things you can change, and non-modifiable risk factors are things that we can't change. So they're things like your hereditary, your age at birth, your sex, your race. And I'm going to really focus on the things that you can change, the modifiable risk factors. And these include smoking. Smoking is the #1 risk factor for heart disease. High blood pressure. High blood pressure can be, we can work on that with lifestyle changes as well as medication. Same with cholesterol. Always trying to not carry excessive weight. If you have diabetes, making sure you're managing diabetes as well as you can with the tools that you have. A sedentary lifestyle is another risk factor, and that's something you can definitely work on. Stress, the stress level in your life. We're going to talk about the two kinds of stress, and sleep. Sleep is really important for your heart health. So today, again, I'm going to just try to focus on small changes that you can make for better heart health. So how do we do this? How do we manage these things? If I had a magic pill that said, if I gave you this pill, you could manage all of your risk factors for heart disease, I think everybody would take it. Unfortunately, I don't have that magic pill, but if you are willing to do some work, you can definitely manage those risk factors. And the things that you really want to focus on are your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your weight, and your diabetes. And how do you manage those things? Well, you have to make good food choices, which is really easy to say, but not so easy to do in the world that we live in. And I'm going to really dive deeply into nutrition. Another thing you can do is trying to manage an ideal body weight. I know a lot of us are not at our ideal body weights if we're later in life. It's maybe not an attainable goal, but maintaining an ideal body weight for you is probably an attainable goal. And then getting regular exercise. We're going to dive deeply into what regular exercise really is and how many minutes you should be getting each week. And if you are smoking, then to please try to stop. There's a lot of good resources out there for smoking cessation. Again, smoking is the #1 risk factor for heart disease. And again, you want to avoid excessive alcohol consumption, because alcohol is one of those things that, we don't realize how much it affects our bodies. It's if you have more than one drink a day, that is actually going to increase your blood pressure, and having high blood pressure is a risk factor for heart disease. And then always taking medications as prescribed. If you're somebody who knows you have high blood pressure or diabetes or high cholesterol, and you've been prescribed medication, it's really important to take those medications as prescribed to keep those your numbers in check. And so knowing your numbers, making sure you know what your good and bad cholesterol numbers are, your blood sugar, if you're somebody, again, who has diabetes, or if you've been told you have pre-diabetes, it's really important to know those blood sugars. Making sure you know your blood pressure and what is an ideal weight for you. So if you're, getting close to that ideal weight, or if you're getting further away from it. So those are some things that you can focus on. Now let's dive into my favorite modifiable risk factor, which is a heart healthy diet. So a heart healthy diet can go a long way to modify your risk factors for heart disease. It's really recommended that you get 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. People will always ask me what a serving size is. So I always put it up here. 1/2 cup of fruit or vegetables is 1 serving. And you should think about trying to get 4.5 cups a day. And people say, wow, that is a lot of fruits and vegetables. I talk to a lot of people, and most people really struggle to get 1 fruit or vegetable a day. So how do you add them in? I like to tell people to try to think about adding fruits and vegetables in 2s. Try to get 2 servings in the morning, 2 servings in the midday, and 2 servings in the late afternoon and evening. So that way you can try to get to that 5 servings. You might not get to it every meal, but if you're aiming for those 2, then maybe you'll get to that 5 servings a day. So the other thing I like to really focus on is variety. A lot of people will get sort of stuck in an eating rut, and they'll buy the same fruits and vegetables every day. If you look in somebody's cart, you should look down in your cart when you're grocery shopping and you're in that produce section, and you should see a rainbow of colors. And why is that important? That variety is so important because we now know that fruits and vegetables, the colors or the phytonutrients in them actually have different compounds to help us fight disease. So for example, those blueberries are going to help your body produce the hormones or the serotonin to elevate your mood. So you want to make sure you're eating a variety, whereas an onion is going to give you a different benefit, maybe an anti-inflammatory benefit. So that variety of color is going to give you that variety of benefits. And then you really want to try to eat fruits and vegetables in their whole forms. And that's important because of the fiber. The whole fruit or vegetable is going to have a higher level of fiber than the process. For example, like if you eat a whole apple with the peel, you're going to get 4 4.5 grams of fiber per serving. Whereas if you were to eat an applesauce, you'd get maybe 1.5 grams of fiber. And if you drink the apple juice, you're getting no fiber. And that fiber is very important for a lot of reasons. I'm going to go through that in a second. But you, the other thing is that whole form fruit is also going to probably be a better bang for your buck. I like to think about that whenever I talk about diet with people, because as inflation has gone up, the cost of food has gone up, and people will say, oh, it's really expensive to eat healthy. But if you actually do the math, if you're eating food in its whole form, it actually is, it's actually can be a good deal. So you want to, if you are someone who, you live alone and you have a hard time keeping fruits and vegetables in the house because you're one person and they go bad. People will often ask me about canned fruit or canned vegetables. And I will say, you want to try to get them either sodium free if you can, or sugar free if you can, or in water, not necessarily sugar free, because you want to look at that label. If something says sugar free and it has the artificial sweetener in it, I would say choose something in water versus something that says sugar free and has an artificial sweetener. Those artificial sweeteners, we now know, can actually trick our body and act like just like regular glucose in our bloodstream. So it's important. That's very important for diabetics. But so I steer people away from the ones that say sugar free that might have an added sweetener. And I say, like, look for the ones in water. And sodium, I've found after the pandemic, it's very hard for me to find completely sodium-free beans in my supermarket. I don't know if it's just my supermarket, but I am having a hard time. So what I do is I rinse them, and I rinse them really well, like not just a quick rinse. I rinse them for a good 5 minutes. So I'm pretty sure that most of that sodium has gotten washed off. And you can do that. You can do the same for something. For example, if you loved canned peaches and you can only find them in a light syrup, if you rinse them in the colander with water, you will rinse a lot of that extra sugar that's added to it off. So that's a good option. And people will also often ask me about frozen. Frozen fruit is a great option. I always keep frozen blueberries in my freezer because if I have it, I'll eat it. If it's not there, I won't. And the same with my kids. I'll be able to throw a handful of blueberries on their cereal in the morning or on their plate next to whatever else they might be eating to help them get that serving in. So if the frozen fruits means you're going to have it in your house and you'll actually eat it, then they work really well. And there's wonderful single serving frozen fruits and vegetables in the freezer section now. You just have to look for them. I found single serving frozen pieces of mango, which my kids really enjoy. If you're someone who likes smoothies, they're fantastic for that as well. As you can tell, I could go on and on about fruits and vegetables for a long time. So I'm going to move myself on. We're going to talk about whole and sprouted grains. So it's really important. And again, I'm going to challenge you to make a small change in your diet because we should be getting 30 grams of fiber a day. The average American gets about 15. So your main source of fiber in your diet comes from your fruits and vegetables, but also from whole grains. So if you're someone who's eating primarily white bread, or you eat a lot of white rice or white pasta, I'm going to challenge you to make a small change. Maybe instead of, having white bread, changing to 100% whole wheat bread. Or if you're someone who likes white rice, I would say maybe try brown rice, and not a complete switch, but even if you do a third of your serving as whole brown rice, or half of the serving as brown rice, you can mix them and cook them together. That's fine. That'll increase your fiber, and maybe over time that'll be a change that you can go completely to brown rice. And then I would also challenge you to try a quinoa or a farro on the side versus rice. They have fantastic flavors, and they are really a nice nutty flavor to them, and they're full of fiber. So that will really help you get to that 30 grams of fiber a day. Or if you're someone who starts your day with oatmeal, but right now you're choosing the packet that's in, a little packet that you add water or milk to. I would challenge you to look at the label and look at how many grams of fiber is in there. It's probably 1 to 2 grams of fiber. But if you switch to a steel cut oat or an Irish oat, which is less processed, more nutrient dense, you're going to get about 5 grams of fiber per serving. So again, easier to get you to that 30 grams a day. And a good rule of thumb when you're looking for something with a higher fiber, whether it be a whole wheat bread or a cracker, you want to look for 3 grams per serving of fiber. That'll tell you that it is a significant source of fiber. Okay, so more things that we should eat more of include plant-based proteins. Plant-based proteins are fabulous. It's a really good way to increase the fiber in your diet. But plant-based proteins are what I like to call nature's perfect food, because you have that protein and you have that fiber together. And those two things work really well in your digestive system. It slows your digestion down. And it actually decreases the rate in which the blood sugar, which your body breaks the food down into blood sugar that goes into your body. It decreases that rate in which the blood sugar goes into your body. And so you have a nice, even amount of energy. If you're eating a lot of simple sugars or simple carbohydrates without fiber, your blood sugar goes up very fast and it comes down very fast. So you get peaks and valleys. And if anybody out there has diabetes, you'll know those peaks and valleys are what we consider very dangerous. They're what causes damage in your arteries. So you want to avoid those peaks and valleys for better health. So increasing plant-based fiber can also lower your risk, not just for cardiovascular disease, but also for some types of cancer. And again, because you're fuller, longer, and you have that satiety, that actually helps with weight management because it helps to regulate the amount of food that you eat. So it really can offer you a number of different benefits. Some of the things I would challenge you to try would be red lentils, lentils or chickpeas, nuts, tempeh, which is a type of soy product, soybean, or just swapping lean chicken for something somewhere where you might have used pork or red meat. That can really help increase the fiber in your diet, choosing those plant-based proteins. So now moving on and talking a little bit about choosing unsaturated fats. So unsaturated fats actually help to decrease the amount of saturated fats in your diet, because if you're choosing the unsaturated versus the saturated, obviously you'll eat less saturated, but you do need fat in your diet. I was a dietitian back in the 90s, and we used to tell people to, eat fat-free this, fat-free that, but we've now changed our minds and everybody needs fat. We know it's an essential part of your diet. Your body doesn't make certain essential fatty acids, and that's how your body needs that for brain development, for your skin, and for your hair. So it's really important that you do choose fat in your diet, but you choose an unsaturated fat. You should have about 20 to 30% of your total calories from unsaturated fats. And certain unsaturated fats can actually help lower your LDL or your bad cholesterol. So you want to really make sure that you are choosing those unsaturated fats. And so what are some of those? Those include what everybody knows is olive oil, canola oil, avocados, almonds, pumpkin seeds, peanut butter, fatty fish, walnuts, tofu, soybeans, and flax seeds. So you really want to think about how you can include these in your diet, whether it's using cooking oil or whether it's using a peanut butter or any type of nut butter as a meat replacement. That's going to go a long way to decrease your risk for heart disease. So let's move on and talk a little bit about saturated fats. So saturated fats are from animal products. They are solid at room temperature. So anything that is a processed food, processed foods tend to have more saturated fats in them because they have things like butter in them. And red meats are saturated fats. So it's recommended that you only eat 4 ounces of red meat twice a week or less. And 4 ounces, for anybody who is thinking about that, you know, maybe portion size is a good way to make a small change. 4-ounce serving is about the size of your fist. So if you think about the amount of the size of a portion of red meat you would get out in a restaurant, it's generally a lot larger than that. So maybe you could make is to not order red meat in a restaurant and only prepare it at home when you can control the serving size. That's one small change you could make. And then also avoiding full fat dairy. Dairy is naturally has saturated fat because it comes from animals. Animal products generally contain saturated fats. So you want to choose low fat or no fat dairy products. And then coconut oil is the tricky one. A lot of people, there's been a lot of hype about coconut oil in the press, that it's this great food for you, but it actually acts as a saturated fat in your body. And if you have coconut oil at home, you know it is solid at room temperature. So again, it does tell you right there that is a saturated fat. So you want to use that in moderation. A lot of people will say, but I really like it when I'm cooking with certain recipes. And I will say, use a very small amount because if you're using it for the flavor, use a small amount and use it at the end of the recipe so that you get that flavor. And now let's move on and talk a little bit about sodium. Sodium is added to most processed foods, and the reason the food industry adds sodium to foods is for flavor. There's a lot of great ways to add flavor to foods if you're cooking on your own, but the processed foods have a lot of sodium in them. And unfortunately, that does include things like bread. Again, I'm going to challenge you to make this small change. Just look at your bread label at home, maybe today or sometime this week, and look and see how much sodium is in your bread. I have seen bread labels that have anywhere from 75 milligrams a slice to 250 milligrams a slice. And the current recommendation for sodium is 2,300 milligrams a day, but the American Heart Association says they really would like people to eat about 1,500 milligrams a day for optimal health. So that is going to be tricky if you're using bread to make sandwiches, or if you have toast in the morning on a regular basis, that's a higher sodium bread. So I'm going to challenge you to look at your bread when you get home, or if you are home when this is over. And then a good rule of thumb is entrees should be no more than 400 milligrams of sodium, and snacks should be no more than 200 milligrams of sodium. The American Heart Association has come out with what they call the Salty Six. So that includes bread and rolls, because there's a lot of sodium in there. Pizza is a very salty food. Most of us eat pizza in America at least once a week. It's sad, but it's true. And the dough is made with a lot of salt, and again, if you're getting it out, the sauce could also have a lot of salt in it. So one of the ways you can do this, you can have your pizzas to make it at home, and to ensure that you're using a dough that's lower in sodium, or that you're choosing a marinara sauce that's lower in sodium. Excuse me, or a pizza sauce that's lower in sodium, or making the sauce yourself is a great alternative. The same with soup. Soup is in a can. It's, again, the salt is for flavor and to preserve it. So you want to make sure you are choosing a lower sodium soup, or again, making it at home. And instead of adding a lot of salt to it for flavor, add things like spices. And then at the end of the cooking process, you could add a squeeze of lemon to it to really bring out the natural flavors in the soup. That's a great way to bring out natural flavors. Sandwiches, because they sandwiches are really tricky. There's sodium in the bread, there's a lot of sodium in cold cuts, and there's sodium in cheese. So if you're someone who's going to have a sandwich for lunch every day, you've got to understand that that can be close to 1,000 milligrams of sodium. So that's really tricky to try to maintain that 1,500 milligrams for optimal health, or even the 2,300 milligrams. So I'm going to challenge you to look at what you're eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and see if you can come up with about how much sodium that you're consuming. And then last but not least, we have burritos and tacos. And again, that is the wrap. The wraps and the tortilla is very high in sodium. But again, if you look at the label, they definitely vary. Some are considerably higher than others. So that's a good way to make a small change, is if you're someone who loves those burritos and tacos, looking for a wrap that's a little bit lower in sodium. Okay, I'm getting a little long on time, so I'm gonna just talk a little bit more about processed foods. The food industry is not our friend. Anything that comes in a box or a bag or a can generally has 3 things in it to make it taste really good, and I bet you can guess exactly what those 3 things are. It's salt, fat, and sugar. So trying to limit the number of processed foods in your diet is a great way to try to limit those 3 ingredients that we know are not really good for us. You know, sugar is a big one. They've started to add sugar to a lot of things. When you're looking at that bread label for sodium, you also want to look at it for sugar. You're thinking to yourself, why would they put sugar in bread? I don't know, I guess to make it taste even better. So there's now quite a bit of sugar in some breads. So you really want to look at the food label for that as well. It's recommended that women only consume about 24 grams of sugar and men 36 grams or less of sugar. And again, the food label has changed. So if you haven't looked at it in a while, make sure you take a look. You can see the amount of the total sugar, and then it says the added sugar on the food label. That added sugar is what the food manufacturer has added to make it taste better. The rest of it is just a naturally occurring sugar. Like, for example, like a yogurt has a lot of naturally occurring sugar. And then again, to talk about alcohol, I mentioned that before, how you want to really limit the amount of alcohol in your life. If you don't drink, don't start. The recommendation is 1 drink or less for women a day and 2 drinks or less for men. And I always get the question, no, you cannot save them all up for the weekend and drink them all at once. So the recommendation is really 1 or less for women, 2 or less for men. And the reason is that when you drink alcohol, after 1 drink, it raises your blood pressure. As your blood pressure goes up, that increases your risk for heart disease. So because that high blood pressure, again, causes that damage to the vessels. So another thing I like to point out, that a serving size is a 12-ounce beer. And if you're someone who drinks those craft beers, those beers are not 12 ounces. They can be 16 or 20 ounces. So that would be almost 2 drinks. And a 5-ounce glass of wine, I've not seen a 5-ounce glass of wine poured at a restaurant in years. So you want to be mindful of the serving size. And then I really like this visual because I think I like to give people a second to just sort of look at it and think to themselves, what can I change? Does my plate look like this? Is half of my plate fruits and vegetables? Is the other side of it the largest portion grains, or is it protein? So again, if you're someone who has animal protein at every meal, again, the recommendation for the serving size is 4 ounces. So you want to think about, what small change can you make in your diet? And now I'm going to switch gears and we're going to talk about exercise. Exercise is really important for a heart healthy life. You really want to try to get 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week, or if you're someone who does very vigorous aerobic exercise, you can do 75 minutes a week. but really these are the minutes that you're looking for. A lot of people will measure steps. 10,000 steps got a lot of hype in the news, but it's really, we now know that it's really, even 5,000 to 7,000 steps a day will actually give you some heart health benefits. So, don't be discouraged if you're not doing 10,000. You may be doing enough. And you want to make sure you're focusing on what type of activities you're doing. That brisk walking, you should be able to have a conversation, but you should not be able to sing. If you can sing while you're walking, you're probably not walking brisk enough. Water aerobics is a fantastic exercise. It's non-impact on joints, and it's a great way to really get your heart moving. Gardening, dancing, lawn mowing, all of those things are great moderate activities. Vigorous activities, things like running, swimming, riding a bike fast up hills, walking upstairs. Those are those vigorous activities. And if you're doing that in a significant way each week, that would be about 75 minutes. So the best thing you can do is set goals for yourself, start small. And I like people to track their exercise. I love data. I'm very motivated by data. And if you're that way too, even the most inexpensive tracker will show you how many steps you're doing. So maybe if you're someone who's looking to start exercising, think about a tracker, or even just think about having a notebook and writing down the number of minutes you're exercising if you're not tracking steps. But you want to make something a habit, do something every day or almost every day, because to get to that 150 minutes, you either need to do 20 minutes 7 days a week or 30 minutes 5 days a week. So think about what might work for you. And then the American Heart Association really wants you to vary your exercise. There are 4 types of exercise that we consider sort of strength and resistance. There's strength and resistance, there's balance, flexibility, and endurance. That strength and resistance training is so, so important. That includes free weights, machines, resistance bands. Working each muscle group twice a week, 2 days off for rest in between workouts is ideal. So I like to tell people, whatever strength training thing you do, you should make sure to do it twice a week. Because the benefits of strength training include increasing your muscle mass. And if you have more muscle mass, your body is more metabolically active, even at rest. So that means when you're sleeping or you're sitting here listening to me, you're burning more calories if you have more muscle mass. And that's really important because as we age, we naturally lose muscle mass. So we really need to keep up that strength training to avoid that. And then how do we get started with exercise? If you're someone who's looking to get a little stronger or start an exercise routine, you want to think about how you can schedule it into your day. That 30 minutes is a lot of time. Sometimes you need to break it up into 2 or 3 segments. Or if you're someone who's just getting started, maybe a 3 to 5 minute walk a couple of times a day is the way to go for you. But you want to think about small ways you can increase that exercise, like taking the stairs whenever you can, walking further, to a parking spot instead of parking close, walking a block or walking a couple of blocks away to a store instead of walking, parking right in front of it. And then really important these days to not sit for more than 30 minutes. We now know that even standing up after 30 minutes is really beneficial to your heart. Sitting for long periods of time is, we know now, one of the risk factors for heart disease. So you want to make sure that you don't sit for more than 30 minutes at a time. If you need to set a timer, that's a great way to, if you have an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, you can set a reminder to get yourself to stand up. And that will help you achieve that goal. I always encourage people to try a new activity, pickleball, golf, join a walking club. I have a lot of great walking clubs I can tell you about. We do, most senior centers in your area have a walking club. And if you're looking for a way to, get some routine exercise in, that's a great way to start. All right, I don't want to give not enough time to stress, because stress is a risk factor for heart disease. A lot of people don't realize this, that stress is actually very much tied to how your It can actually cause the plaquing and the damage in your arteries, just like a bad diet or a sedentary lifestyle. But there are two kinds of stress. There's healthy stress and there's unhealthy stress. Healthy stress is that like energized feeling you get when you get good news, or you feel really focused on a project, you feel really excited about something, maybe in control of it. That unhealthy stress is when you feel sort of out of control or overwhelmed, frustrated. And that's the kind of stress you want to avoid. So how do you do that? There's a lot of great ways to de-stress yourself. You can engage in relaxation. How do you do that? There are a lot of great apps out there now. There's Insight Timer, there's Calm. And if you have an Apple Watch, you have a built-in meditation reminder on your phone, just taking a minute to either meditate or be mindful. Every day, a couple times a day is a great way to do that. Exercise for a lot of people is a great stress reducer. And finding a hobby that you enjoy. Like some people really like to do puzzles. I love puzzles. Anything that kind of takes you away. Like you think about how into a puzzle you get when you're doing a puzzle, looking for that specific piece. Your mind isn't thinking about anything else. It's not, you're so focused that you're really just into that one thing. So finding a hobby like that you enjoy is a great way to do it. And then seeking support from family and friends is really important. And if you need more than that, you need professional support, making sure you find that as well. And then last but not least, sleep. Sleep is actually one of the risk factors. Getting poor sleep is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. We know that poor sleep can actually, again, lead to that damage in your arteries. So you want to make sure that you do everything you can to help your sleep environment, because as we get older, again, the hormones that our body creates to help our bodies go to sleep naturally, like the melatonin, those decrease as we age. So it's really important to set yourself up for a very good sleep environment. So trying not to nap after 3 p.m. is important because you don't want your body to be too well rested in your bedtime. And then trying to avoid exercise close to bedtime, because as you know, exercise kind of revs your body up. It gets you ready for the day. And then avoiding caffeine or nicotine. Those are stimulants. You don't want to stimulate your body before bedtime. And then also you want to really turn off that smartphone or that smart device at least 1 hour before bedtime, because that light that is emitted from our smartphones actually signals our brains to wake up. And if our brain's being signaled to wake up, light actually tells our brain to not make melatonin. It's when you're in that darker setting, our bodies naturally start to make that melatonin. So that bright light in our face before we go to bed actually tells our body not to make it. So it's important to avoid that, because you want your body to naturally make that melatonin that you need to sort of start to wind down and go to sleep at night. And then also, I can't emphasize a cool environment. Our bodies are much more apt to sleep in a cool environment than a hot environment. So if you're someone who does keep your house very warm during the day, making sure you turn that temperature down at night, very important. So I love this this symbol. This is a symbol for our community heart health initiative. It's basically everything I talked about here today. You want to make sure you know your numbers to start out with. You want to know that cholesterol. You want to know your blood sugar, your blood pressure. So that you know where you are, and you track that over time so you can see changes and bring it to your attention of your healthcare provider. You want to nourish your body with the best nutrition you can. That's going to set you up for a healthy start. And then moving every day is a great idea. And again, trying to get that 20 or 30 minutes a day to get to that 150 minutes a week. Always be smoke-free, because that is the #1 risk factor for heart disease. Finding a way to relax, very important. And that relaxation can be very restorative to your body. The one thing I didn't say about sleep is that, that is the only time your body has to restore itself, is when you're sleeping at night. So that restorative time is extremely important for having a heart healthy body. So I hope you guys have found this very useful. Hopefully everybody figured out some small change that you can take away and make in your life. And I'm going to now stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it back over to Bob.
Let's see. Morning. Thank you, Jane. I'm Bob Jobber. I wanted to introduce myself, and I am one of the co-coordinators of the Mended Hearts of Newton group. Mended Hearts is a group of cardiac patients and their caregivers in your local area. Mended Hearts is the largest peer-to-peer support group in the world for cardiac patients. There are over 190 chapters and over 60,000 members nationwide. And now locally, we've got Mended Hearts of Newton Group. We're your local group that started about 2.5 years ago. We have periodic informational meetings with guest speakers, as well as other meetings that are devoted to sharing. That offers our members an opportunity to connect with other people that have had cardiac procedures or that have ongoing cardiac issues. At the present time, all of our meetings are on Zoom because they were started during COVID. And at the moment, we've kept it on Zoom, which people find easier. Our mission: to inspire hope, improve the quality of life for heart patients and their families through ongoing peer-to-peer support. What many people fail to realize is that our cardiac issues affect our families. They go through heartache as we go through heart procedures. Our national organization has many educational guides, brochures, and webinars on a variety of pertinent topics. There's also many online support opportunities, and it's a great website. And by the way, you can join our Mended Hearts group for free if you choose. There is no financial obligation. Why do people find all of this helpful? Members get support from someone that has had similar experience. Heart patients know what heart patients go through. Even if the procedures themselves are not exactly the same, we've got a lot in common. We provide helpful information on various medical conditions and on recovery of our own issues, and encouragement. Encouragement is always helpful. I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak and present this. Should you have any questions, or if you'd like to join our group, please contact either Joan McCullough or myself. Here's my contact information, and this will also be sent to you in the follow-up email.
Thank you, Jane and Bob. Those are excellent words of wisdom, and Jane, your practical advice for small changes we can make without making it so overwhelming is excellent. So I hope you all kind of have a lot of takeaways from the information that was shared by both Jane and Bob. We are now going to switch to our questions and answers, and there's some great things that came in. So I'm going to start with those, and then we have some additional ones as well if we have time. So let me begin. Is it all kind of nuts, and should in terms of your recommendations around the intake of nuts. And then a second part of this question is, should chicken be only white or can it be dark part as well? This person loves thighs versus breast meat. So can you comment on that?
Absolutely. So I say all nuts are better than chips or any type of processed food. So if you're going to choose, I say this to my kids all the time, if you're going to choose a nut, any type of nut is better than any type of processed food. So if you're choosing a nut over that, that's great. If you want to go for the ultimate best nuts, it's walnuts and almonds are, you know, sort of like the best nuts, but peanuts have gotten sort of a bad press. But again, I say, like, if you're choosing peanuts and that's your favorite nut, and that's keeping you from eating something like a chip or a processed cracker, then that's a better choice. The tough thing with nuts is that they are very calorically dense. So I recommend very strongly that you have a small bowl. If you're, you know, you bought a big container of them, and you use a small bowl so that you know what your serving size is, so you're not eating too many calories. Because calories, we don't really talk about calories that much anymore, but you know, if you're trying to maintain an ideal weight, you've really got to really make sure you're using the proper serving sizes. So that's why I recommend the small serving or a small bowl to use as a serving size for your nuts. But I'm kind of across the board. All nuts are great sources of fiber, and they're great sources of unsaturated fat. So I think they're all good. And then the chicken is you know, I think you probably know the answer to this. The dark meat is actually higher in saturated fat, and that's why we recommend that you eat the white meat. But again, I look at what is the change? Like, can you eat a combination of dark and white meat instead of just dark meat? That would be a good change. Or if you're someone who eats dark meat instead of red meat, that would be a good change, because that's less saturated fat. So the red meat has the most saturated fat. Of dark meat chicken has less saturated fat, but a white meat chicken has no saturated fat. So you really, or the least amount of saturated fat, I shouldn't say no. So that's sort of how my recommendation would go there.
That's great, because I think it speaks to what you've said during your presentation in terms of a lot of it also is based on quantity. So how much you're intaking of each of the items that you're talking about too. Great, thank you. This often comes up around the oils, and I know you touched on this. Are there better oils than canola oils? I have heard a lot of negative press regarding all nut oils. So what do we use as a vegetable oil other than olive oil?
So I get this question all the time. So olive oil is really the best oil to use, olive oil, and it should be the extra virgin olive oil, again, because the extra virgin is the least processed olive oil. If you're getting olive oil that is not extra virgin, it has gone through extra processing, and you've actually lost some of the antioxidants that are in olive oil. So you want to choose extra virgin olive oil when you're using it, but it doesn't, you don't really, it degrades at a high cooking temperature. So you can't really use extra virgin olive oil to cook at a high temperature. You want to use something like an avocado oil. That again is probably the better choice than a canola oil.
Great, thank you. And this is a good question for me because I am a very strong coffee drinker. So if you are a coffee drinker, what time should you stop drinking coffee for a good night's sleep?
So the recommendation is 3 o'clock. You really shouldn't have the coffee after 3 o'clock. Actually, not just coffee, any type of stimulant. So, you know, there's caffeine in a lot of different drinks now. So you have to, you want to monitor what you're drinking after 3 o'clock. Make sure it's got no type of stimulant in it. And you know, this recommendation, I say I kind of give it with a grain of salt, because I have known people who can drink coffee and still go to sleep at night. So you know yourself. I like to, you know, and if you're someone who thinks that coffee might affect them, I always say keep a journal. Write it down when you're having the coffee, and then write down the next day, like, how was your night's sleep? So was it related to the coffee or not? That way you can kind of figure out what works best for you, because for some people it's 3 o'clock, for some people it's 12 o'clock. It's really, I think, based on you. So you kind of need to figure that one out with a journal.
Great, thank you. Journal's a great idea. And so there are two questions I'm going to combine here. And going back, I think this is a recurring category in terms of fats and oils, and then also the nuts over the salty versus the nuts. So we used to think polyunsaturated fats were the best. Now I think unsaturated fats are the best. Is that correct? And then the second part of that question is, if you're recommending nuts over chips, just to clarify, isn't it important to buy unsalted nuts?
Oh, that's a great question. I love that question. So the MUFAs and the PUFAs, the polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated fats, my latest readings on that, you need a combination of both. So because they both contain the essential fatty acids that our body needs in order to function properly. So a combination of them, but like everything else, it's moderation. That 20 to 30% of your total calories, again, it's moderation. So if you're choosing the MUFAs and the PUFAs, just choose them in moderation is my recommendation. And then the salty is a good one. So we in this country have been trained to love salt. The food industry has done a great job in making us love salt. So I would challenge you, if you're someone who buys nuts or chips, to try to go to the reduced salt version of either. I mean, I recommend nuts over chips. But even if you're trying a chip, even if you're choosing a chip, to choose a lower salt chip. There's now the lightly salted, or there's low salt. And I challenge you to move yourself down the spectrum, because salt is something you get used to in your diet. You get used to having that really salty food. But if you take it away, your palate quickly adjusts. So you can easily move from a full salt to a low salt to a no salt. And so I would say do it over time and try to reduce the salt in your diet that way, because I had a very enlightening experience when I went to another country for 10 days. And it was a country where everything was made from scratch practically, and they used very little salt. And I came back here and I could not stand how salty the foods tasted, because that's all it took, was that 10 days of having very, very little salt for me to realize how much salt was in some of the things I was eating.
And then what about baked, like chips? Like, what is baked better than low salt or equal, or?
So baked is not really related to salt. Baked is generally related to the amount of fat, because chips are deep fried or they're baked. So again, I would challenge you to turn that package over and look at the label, but it's generally going to be a lower in fat chip if it's a baked chip versus a regular chip.
Great. And then something you had mentioned, a question for that had come in, is why is sugar consumption levels different for men and women? You had given two different pieces of data for men and women around that.
So I think that's a physiological question. I think that the fact that men are generally bigger than women is probably the answer why the recommendations are different for women and men. That's the answer when it comes to calories. Men generally get more calories, but they also have more muscle mass than women. So it's related just to your anatomy.
Okay. And then just going back, we just had maybe two more questions. Going back to the salt topic, what is the difference between sea salt and regular salt? So many recipes now ask for sea salt. So what is the difference between those two?
So that's a good question. I love that question, because sea salt is generally just it's a bigger piece of salt. So when you measure it, you're actually getting less salt than if you were to measure a regular salt, which is a very small grain. If you think about the size of a piece of sea salt and the size of a regular salt, so you're getting a little bit less salt in the sea salt, but it's just as salty.
It's still salt is salt, right?
Salt is salt.
Okay, great. Thank you. And those were all the questions, and this is perfect timing because we're right close to 11 o'clock. One thing I wanted to highlight, because Jane mentioned a couple different times, Apple Watch. And I do want to remind people that last month we actually had a webinar on wearable apps and recommendations around that, and some detail in terms of motivations, what to pick, what's out there. And so that is posted on the Newton-Wellesley Hospital YouTube channel, which you can obviously just Google. All of our programming, including today, will be posted there for anyone to view. And so if you have any questions about that, I would just recommend going back and listening to that recording as well, as you think about, data consumption, if that's something that you're interested in, like Jane is herself. So I really want to thank Jane and Bob and everyone for the great questions and great content this morning. I definitely learned a lot. I always do from Jane and her recommendations. And I hope all of you did as well. As we mentioned, as Bob said as well, we are going to provide the slide decks as well as the resources, additional resources out to anyone who registered for the program. So you'll receive those within the week's time, and that will come from the Newton-Wellesley Hospital Collaborative in your email. So make sure you be aware of that coming in your inboxes. And then just as a reminder, Newton-Wellesley Hospital Community Health has a continuous menu of programs that are offered for a variety of different health topics and health-related topics. And those are all listed on our website, which is www.nwh.org. And so we recommend that you look at those regularly, obviously sign up for those. If there's of interest, pass them along to family, friends, and neighbors so that they're aware of those as well. So on behalf of Newton-Wellesley Hospital, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we hope to see you on a future webinar program. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.